Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Women of Inspiration Testimonies. I'm Tammy Bruni, and I have the Women of Inspiration platform on Facebook. And this is really just a platform to encourage ladies and just sort of walk with them on their journey, give them nuggets, things to encourage their faith, and have testimonies like this and talks that really just inform their lives. And mainly it's bringing encouragement and support. I also have Lines Arise, which is a counseling practice that focuses mainly on Christian counseling. I really enjoyed in trauma counseling. And that was one of the reasons why I also started this platform, Women of Inspiration, because I seem to have a lot of women that come to me for counseling, and I just realize how much support they need, and especially the various roles that we carry in everyday life, that we need encouragement from others in those roles as well. And so today I have Angelique du Toit with me, and it's such a privilege to just introduce her and just to say thank you, Angelique, for making the time today. And Angelique currently is in Somerset, but she's travels the globe. So she lives in Italy, Portugal. So she's been all over, and her life is truly inspirational. I've read her bio. It's really awesome. And I know that what she's going to share with us today will be really encouraging. I mean, she's a keynote speaker. She is a podcaster. She's written 5 books. They look really interesting. I like the one that says, "What in the world are you waiting for?" I'd like to know a little bit more about that. And yes, also you're a coach and a mentor as well, business and personal. So that's really awesome. It just seems like this awesome package. And I know that even though it's an awesome package, we know that our packages come with their own story, right? The purpose and the destiny that God has for us in our lives. So, Angelique, I'm going to hand over to you. You can maybe just tell us, I don't know if you want to share a little bit more about yourself, and then start your testimony wherever the Lord leads you, and then we'll just take it from there.
Thanks, Tammy. And it's been a real pleasure just in the short discussion we had post this going on recording, just to meet with someone across the airwaves that is in a kindred spirit. And so I always really appreciate that. But I love what you said about our stories and our testimonies come in very interesting packages. And I think that's one of the reasons as we go through life, we are called not to judge, because we can look at somebody and think, that everything has been a certain way for them, or we could misread a situation where somebody is in a totally different space to what we think they are. And that's why I admire your coaching and mentoring approach, because I think it's being aware that we all do have a story and that we all do come from backgrounds that don't necessarily mean that we're going to have that sort of future. But in that process comes our whole journey. And the way I talk about it is life is light and shade. And we're never really in the darkness, even though at times it certainly feels like we are. But it really is about light and shade. And in the shady parts, it might feel that our backs are against the wall. There is no hope. But really, that shade is God's protection while He's taking us through a process. And before we know it, we come out again on another side of the mountaintop and we think, oh my goodness, I am in the light. And so where I live in Italy is really at the foot of the Dolomites. It's on the Austrian border. And when I wake up every morning and I see the Dolomites in light and shade, and I think, isn't that just a picture of the tapestry of life? Because we go through the processes, and if we stop to think long enough, the views from all of them are beautiful. It's just how we choose to see the processes that we go through. And the fact that you alluded to my book, What in the World Are You Waiting For? It is actually my life story. it is completely sold out, and it is time for me to republish it again. But I'm looking at a whole new strategy with my books. But what in the world are you waiting for is actually the question I constantly ask myself through life is, who am I waiting for and what am I waiting for to hope that my life is going to get any better? So many people do know my testimony, probably through reading my books or hearing me speak or through the podcasts. But just for your viewers, I grew up in circumstances that were very difficult, in the sense that my father was a man that didn't take responsibility for the family. My mother was the single breadwinner, although she was in a marriage. It was a very, very difficult home environment. And unfortunately, a lot of what we see today, probably even escalated, is that of domestic abuse. And so I grew up with a lot of fear, a lot of uncertainty, a lot of the basis of what you should feel as a child growing up was lacking, except that. Even though my mother went through what she went through, she used to build these fundamental principles in our lives and just say, it doesn't matter how difficult things get. It doesn't matter what you're feeling. You just never give up. And I think it's also important to mention that she came from the silent generation. So the woman in that generation suffered in silence. And so if you met her, you would never believe what was taking place behind closed doors. And in fact, it was the Leaf magazine here in South Africa that did an article called The Slam of the Door, because that used to dictate how the day was going to go. Was if the door closed quietly that day, we could all breathe. But if the door slammed that day, we knew. Belt up, brace up, because you didn't actually know what was coming. And so I think what happens is that does two things in you. It teaches you to be on high alert. It teaches you to be on guard, but in the good sense, it actually teaches you to be resilient. Now I know through my own coaching and mentoring and my own healing process, which was decades long, that resilience is a very important thing, as long as it doesn't go into resentment. Resentment is, turned in anger. That's really what it is. So we say I'm resilient, but actually we can tend to be resentful. And that resenting makes us feel strong, because we say, I'm going to become untouchable. I am not going to allow this thing to get to me. And people say, wow, you're so resilient. But when God gets to the inner core of you, he's actually gouging out that resentment, because that resentment at the age of 21 nearly drove me to end my life. So at 21, I was somewhere between just merely existing and contemplating, was life worth it? Because there was just so much that was shut down and stuffed down in my life that it's got to come out somewhere. And it either goes, as I write in my books, it's an either explosive emotion that we carry through for the rest of our lives. So you see people who are deeply angry, who just pop off for anything or the least thing that you expect. Or, as I had, you have the implosion, which is that quiet eroding away of the stuff that have just kept under lock and key. And so this had to come out somewhere. And so I tell the story of the three women upon whose shoulders I'm standing, and the first one being my mother. I watched what she went through, and quite honestly, as a wife, a mother, a businesswoman, a woman with responsibility, I look at it and I don't know how she did what she did. And I certainly don't know that I would have done it, because I think we are empowered with different choices. But perhaps in that situation where you feel you don't have a voice, you have to suffer in silence. And I think that is my message to women, is find your voice in and through, or even if it means, and you would know this through your coaching, even if it means that you've got to shout and scream in an empty room, just find your voice and get that stuff out of it. And then the second woman upon whose shoulders I'm standing is a woman that in my desperation, I went to church. I'd always had an awareness of God. I had grown up with a lot of confusing messages about God, but somehow inside me, in a very immature way at 8, I remember being 8 years old, lying in my bed one night and praying. But I didn't quite know who I was praying to, but I just know that who I was praying to was somebody that was hearing me. And I felt this beautiful, wonderful presence in my room that night. And I woke up the next morning and I wrote a very little prayer. And I remember even spelling Armen, Armen, and I stuck this little prayer on my wall next to my bed. And so that was my little window to finding my security in a very turbulent childhood. And so when I knew that something horrendous was going on the inside of me, and something that made me absolutely terrified, I want to say even of myself, that I thought I better get to a church, somebody that can help me. And so I went to a really traditional church, walked in all by myself, sat down, just thought, if I don't get help today, I'm not sure I'm going to be alive tomorrow. That's how desperate the situation is. The choir walked onto the stage, and the very first woman who walked on was a woman that radiated a light that I have never experienced in my life. And I looked at her and I thought, oh, you look like an angel that has come down from heaven to live amongst men. Do you know that the entire time that I sat there while my volcano was just erupting, she never stopped eye contact with me? I don't know what the message was about. I just remember at the end of that service getting up, walking to the back of the room, and there she was at the door. And, you know, we don't know how powerful our lives are. I just spoke to her this morning because she said, I'm going to pray about your interview today. Just an amazing woman. She put her name and her number in my hand, and she said, I don't know you, but I see potential in you. And I want you to know that Jesus really loves you. And call me if I can help you with anything. Well, of course, I did call her. And that was the start at 21 of a dramatic deliverance from anger, resentment, bitterness, hatred, fear. And on her lounge floor, just the Lord met me in the most powerful, powerful way. And that's really where my walk with him started. And so, you know, to live without him is unthinkable. Absolutely unthinkable for me, because I have to say, while I know about light and shade now, I really knew about darkness.
Did you grow up in a home where was your mom a believer, or was there no religion in the home?
There was a lot of confusion around religion. The one thing I knew about religion was it always created arguments, and it always created massive problems, because the views were so polarized that you didn't know who was believing what. And then on my father's side, there was a lot of occultic practice, which was a large part of what I needed to be set free from. And so I'm very happy to say that both of them found the Lord before they passed away. So no, there was no clear guidance and that's where, you know, God sees you and God meets you wherever you are when you call upon his name, because there was no bedrock of solid Christian beliefs. In fact, there was a lot of confusion. It was just about me seeking him in the midst of the chaos, and him being able to find me. And you know that scripture that says, if you call on me, you will be heard by me. I will seek you out and I will find you. David said, I can go anywhere, up, down, left, right. God will find me. He will be there. And so that's my testimony. He found me. I once was really blind, but now I see.
Yeah, so I'm just thinking about that little 8-year-old that had no frame of reference, that lay in her bed and just cried out to the Lord, or said that little prayer, and he heard. And so maybe that was already the start of it, because sometimes there's this process, and our the things that we go through in life prepare us for what we're going to be one day, what we're going to do one day, and the compassion that God just builds into our lives then for other people through that. So he had that divine intervention for you on that day. That was your divine intervention. That's how much he loved you. He created that opportunity for you to meet him, and somebody else that had a heart that saw that opportunity and in her compassion reached out to you. And, I was talking to somebody this morning, and he was saying, we need to have grace for people, because you don't know if that person that you're talking to is the next one that's going to have a huge impact on the world. So she didn't maybe know at the time the impact that you would have on the world. She just played her part in your story. And she came in at that time, and she brought Jesus to you. And now, if you look at where your life is now to that was actually such a huge catalyst. So I want to, and also if we think about her reward in that, because your reward will be her reward, because she's the one that stepped in to that place when you needed it most.
And it's interesting that you use the word reward, because her surname is Ward, and she is Jenny Ward. And what a ministry this woman has, and she has been with me through all of these decades. That's just a testimony to, if we are in the moment enough to have our eyes opened enough to what is going on around us, we can touch a life and we can change it. In fact, my idea of ministry has completely revolutionized throughout my journey, because you receive so many prophetic words, and I think what happens with the prophetic word is we get very lost in our imagination of what it could look like.
Yes.
Yet there's a power in that word, where what God is saying is absolute truth. It's just not necessarily in the way you think it's going to be unfolded. So I had, so many prophetic words about ministry. And in my mind, ministry was behind a pulpit, leading women's conferences. That's what I was going to be. God had a completely different idea in mind. And that's where the woman on the third shoulders upon whom I'm standing was introduced me to the business world. Now, I'm a woman with no education. I left school at 14 because I had to, because of home circumstances. Found my way as an apprentice hairdresser, got fired after 2 years because I lied about my age, had no education, had nothing to offer the world. And a woman came across my path and said, I want to introduce you to a business opportunity, which was completely nuts. I mean, what was I going to do in business? I know nothing. I have no self-confidence. I'm driven by fear. And she said, oh, you're exactly the kind of person that we're looking for. Took me to this business meeting. Well, Tammy, I can tell you, these people were alive with enthusiasm for their business. And they were just celebrating. And I realized that all of these women were micro entrepreneurs, even though I didn't know that concept then. I know now. And they were in the wonderful world of direct selling. And this woman got up on the stage and she told her story. And, that's the power of story. That's the power of testimony. She went up and she said, this is where I was. This is where I am. This is what I'm earning today. And so can you. And I looked around at these women, and they were all beautifully manicured and had gorgeous clothes on. And I sat there all timid and so afraid. And they were handing out their business cards. And it just, how do you even get there? And she took me by the hand, and she started to introduce to me that I could, just by doing the simple things first, learn the process of having a home-based business. And of course, that started to generate an income. And little did I know that one introduction would one day lead us to owning pretty significant direct selling businesses. God's ways are way beyond our ways. So going back to tying that all into the prophetic was believing that ministry was going to be a certain way. God actually took me to hundreds of thousands of people via the business world in a pretty similar format to what happens in church, but just using the business platform as a pulpit. And, you know, God's ways are beyond our imagination. And I think we so often just hold him up by thinking, but Lord, I thought you said it was going to be this way. And he says, you actually have no idea what I'm doing in this if you'll just work with me. And so I'm ever grateful to those three women for that introduction.
Yeah, and often we look at our picture and we think it's a lot smaller than what it really is, you know, because we have a picture based on our perception of what maybe God's going to do in our life through a word that we hear or a prophetic word, or even what God's put in our hearts. And you know, this is one thing the Lord's also spoken to me about, is to not limit him in his capacity because of my thinking, you know, because we think small. God doesn't think small, you know, and sometimes our problem is we're planning for something small and conventional, and he's planning for something huge. And, you know, I always say, if the vision is bigger than you, then you know it's from God, because how do you achieve something that's way bigger than anything you could ever imagine? And sometimes he just rolls it out in your life. So like with your life, he rolled that out for you, right? And you're a co-owner of Anique, right? Health and Beauty. And I remember as a young girl the Anique products. And so I mean, that's quite incredible. Like, he opened this huge door for you that you never would have thought open, but it started at a small place. And it makes me think of that scripture, don't despise small beginnings, right? Because it's the small beginning that leads to the big stuff. And it's being faithful with the little stuff that leads to being faithful with the big stuff, you know, in that process. So I'm just wondering, like, your process of going from that young girl into that meeting to kind of where you are today. What are some of the nuggets or life lessons that God taught you along the way that you might want to share?
Well, that's a lovely question, because I'm actually working on a project at the moment, having just turned the big 6-0. I'm actually working on a book called 60 Facets of Life. And I'm looking at 60 of the most important drivers in my life that God took me through to get me to this place. And it's been such a fascinating journey, because, you know, one is not more important than the other. And then when you put it together, you think, oh, isn't it just incredible how when you look at the beauty of a diamond, it's only got that beauty because it's not just one dimensional. It's got so many facets to it. And I think so often in life, we try and sweep away the things that have been unpleasant or uncomfortable. And yet those are often the things that have made us who we are today, if we're able to keep the joy, if we're able to keep the right spirit, if we're able to push through when sometimes you do want to give up. You know, one of the key learnings that I had was my husband and I had beautiful plans for the future. And one of the reasons was, you know, building this home in Italy was ultimately we were going to retire there. And, you know, the plans were there. And then on the 31st of December, 2019, with no warning, no sign, no indication, not even a sense, nothing, my husband went out on a morning run, came back, said he wasn't feeling so great. I mean, super fit, you know, healthy lifestyle, great visionary, fantastic businessman. happy family man. We'd been married for nearly 30 years. And just looked at him and said, "You're not looking well. I think you need to get down to the hospital." And he said, "I'm not going to the hospital for indigestion." Well, a few minutes later, he passed away. And so it was, of course, a major shock to all of our systems, because you just don't factor that into your into your life at all. And no, it's completely unexpected. And so what happened was, because of the property in Italy, I needed to go and declare the estate to the estate that, you know, he was no longer with us. And of course, that was in February 2020, and in March, COVID hit. And you'll remember that Italy was the country where it was first. And so we were actually put in instant lockdown. And I ended up being in lockdown for 10 months.
Oh, wow.
On my own. And it was an experience that I've tried to describe it. I cannot describe what it is like to grieve on your own, to not have human touch, to not know, well, none of us knew what COVID was. So you didn't know, were we going to survive this? Was I ever going to see my children again? What was this all about?
You'd gone alone to Italy, and your children were all back home. So you were all alone there on your own. Wow, I can't even imagine.
They've all gone their separate ways after the memorial service. My daughter lives overseas. Children are living all over. And there I was on my own. Nobody could come in. Nobody could go out. And Tammy, if ever I can tell you that I trust the keeping power of God, was through those 10 months, where I used to be surprised that I woke up the next morning. It was that, I don't know the word. It was just so like, God, if you don't keep me, I don't know how I'm kept. It was that sort of sense. And I remember putting my hands on myself to try and just feel some human touch, to feel some skin, to feel something. And then I thought to myself, it's no wonder that they actually use isolation as a form of punishment or torture, because you lose so much in your sense of knowing. And yet he was there. And when you think you become completely unthreaded, he just keeps sewing, and his hand was always there. His spirit was always there. So, there are many things in this facet that we've got to look at life and say, the honest truth is that I believe that only what you face, only what you look at as reality, you can change. You can't stand denial and hope to change something. You have to look at the reality of what you're confronting, of what's confronting you, of the opposition you may have, of a plan that perhaps didn't work out the way that you wanted it to. But you've got to face that reality in order to make the change. And so the reality is we are challenged in life. Jesus warned us of that. He said, in this life, you are going to have opposition. There is going to be matters that you're going to deal with that might not necessarily turn out the way you want them to be. And we know that is fact. And so to try and, people say, yes, well, just keep speaking faith. That's all good and well. But face the reality and then put your faith to that. Don't be God just going to come and let's look at somebody who's in dreadful financial debt, for example, to just keep saying, well, by faith, I'm believing God's going to turn the debt. Yes, but what are you going to do? What's your responsibility? And that give God, the open door to come and work with you, which inspires your faith. So I would say really from 2019 and that experience, I started to adopt the greatest of these is faith, hope, and love. And yet overarching is love. And so every time I find myself in a squeeze or a challenging situation, I say, where's your faith? Where's your hope? And where's your love? Because you can't see them in seclusion.
No.
They're all into one another. Because if you have faith, of course, it inspires your hope. And then where does your love come from? Love comes from having faith in God, because you cannot give what you do not have. So it's this beautiful circle of the three things that he's given us. And so if I need more faith, perhaps I need to look at my love meter and say, where is that lacking? And if I'm losing hope, I've got to say, okay, so where's my faith in you, Lord? Where is it on the barometer right now? And then really genuinely comes back to, where's your love? Yes. You know, because if we're irritated, if we're frustrated, if we're angry, if we're disappointed, you know, that faith level goes down and down. The hope comes down. Why? Because we start speaking the things that you know, diminish those areas. But when we get back into love, and what is love? God, I trust you. I trust your love for me. I trust that you've got this, even though I don't see it right now. I trust that you've got this. And so even, you know, in tragedy, in loss, in grief, if we can just remember those three things, they are such a beautiful driver. So that's one of my major facets, to really anchor to when the storm gets up, because it will come to what's happening in the world right now. None of us are assured of which way this is going to go. You know, it could be on a knife edge, or it could be something that God uses for one of the greatest revivals we've ever seen, but we don't know that just yet. We're going to have to anchor in faith, anchor in hope, and really share his love.
Now, there's a scripture that I like to just sort of declare as well, and it's that one, to be strengthened with all might in the inner man through his love, you know, because it's the height and the width and the depth and the breadth of that love. And I always look at it like it's like a structure. It's an architectural structure. You can enter into that place because it's got a dimension to it, but there's no end to it. So you can actually just go into his love, and you can get lost in that place. And then he strengthens your spirit. He strengthens your inner man in his love, because God is love, you know. And I think it's hard for people sometimes to grab that, because they maybe haven't experienced him as a father, you know, a good father. Because I know certainly on my journey, and maybe you can just share a little bit on yours, is that I had to learn that he's a good father. Because growing up, I never really had that example of Father God, a loving father. I thought God's there to beat me up, to be angry with me, to every misstep I make, he's waiting with a rod. You know, that's kind of the environment. And then you got to learn, no, but he loves you. He's your daddy. You can get on his lap. And I think that when that became a reality to me, that I can get on his lap, I can just sit with him, I can crawl into his heart like a little girl, and I can just sit there and he can comfort me. It was just so awesome, because it's my place to go when everything overwhelms me. So I wonder, like, when was it that you formed that relationship with him as well, that he's your daddy and he's your father?
For me, the beautiful thing was, because I had such a fear of a father figure, I had to get to know Jesus first. And Jenny Ward really helped me understand that. That Jesus said, he who has seen me has seen the Father. And so I realized the more I could get in relationship with Jesus, the more I could learn deep intimacy and trust with him, the more I could comfortably get to know him as my Father, to really know Father God, not in a terrified way, but in and through the ways of Jesus, the love of Jesus, the embrace of Jesus, the invitation of Jesus. And so, you know, I was very fortunate, and that happened for me quite quickly, because I understood that he and the Father are one. So if I can feel like this with Jesus, I can feel like that with the Father. And then just a fun thing I want to share with you on faith, hope, and love, because, you know, this just encompasses God's beautiful way of dealing with us. I was in a conference in America a couple of years ago, and it was a group of probably 2,000 executives, and this woman had such a beautiful way of dismantling the pedestals we put ourselves on when we reach a certain, you know, level in business, or you wear your, you know, your guest badge for being at this conference. And she just really had this unique way of just stripping down all the performance and all of the fluff. And I think this happens in Christianity as well, which is why I'm actually sharing the story. Just how simple and practical and wonderful God's way of dealing with us is, because as I sat there, I thought, oh, this is just so powerful. And the one thing that she said was, have you been in a situation where you realize that there's something really special that has been put inside of you, whether it's a gift or a talent or a skill or ability? And she said, you know, that's really where you shine. But as you go through life, and she had shared her story, and she'd had quite a dramatic life. She said, but as you go through life, you realize that that sparkle begins to dull. That shine begins to get worn away. And she said, I just want to tell you today, your title, your standing, your success, your money that you've made, whatever it is that you might have brought you to this conference today, nothing of that has got anything to do with your life. What has got to do with your life is not to allow the inner sparkle of what's been put in you to ever be dulled. And I immediately applied that to our walk with the Lord, because I thought, you know, you've put so much in our lives. And if we don't operate in faith, hope, and love, we allow that sparkle, that shine, that beauty that you've put in us to be dulled. Then the second thing she said was, and this is the hope. So she said, when we go through things, we can so easily get disappointed, and we can so easily lose focus. But she said, just remember every day to put on your gratitude glasses, because your gratitude glasses are the very things that are going to carry you through the day. The saying, thank you, you know, thank you, Lord, for those things that even when we don't understand them. And then the third story she told, and for me, this is the love and the inspiration that really for us is God's way of saying there is so much for you to celebrate. So she tells us the story where she picked up her grandson from school, and he was really intently telling her about what had happened at school that day. And she said, oh, well, that's great, Jamie. I'm so happy for you. And he tapped on the shoulder and he said to her, really, that's not great. That's ta-da. And he said, when last did you do a huge ta-da about something that happened in your life? And I thought, what a beautiful capturing of how God wants us to live our lives. Don't let your sparkly bits be dulled. Keep your gratitude glasses on and just praise in everything. Yeah. It was just such a beautiful reminder. And that's going to go one of my facets.
Yeah, so I love the way you've weaved that faith, hope, and love together, because it's so true. And yeah, I mean, that almost is like an anchor, you know, that just even I'm getting a visual of an anchor as you speak of it, you know, the 3 points, the hooks, and then the little centerpiece, and how we can just anchor into the Lord in that. And if you think about gratitude, so gratitude's become a huge thing even in dealing with trauma. You know, where it's become a huge part of mindfulness, you know, paying attention to what we can be thankful for in every day versus, you know, the things that are going wrong or the things that aren't yet where we want them to be. You know, and if we think we come into his courts with praise, right, and become a thanksgiving, that's always the first step to receiving, because we come into his gates. So we enter into that place. We come with thanksgiving. We have gratitude for what he's done in our lives, and that's where it starts. Right. If you think about worship, that's also a form of worship. You know, when the worshippers went into battle before Israel, you know, that brought about the victory, because God inhabits the praises of his people. So even just that praise, giving thanks to him for your life. And the enemy will so easily get us to focus on everything that's wrong in our lives versus seeing actually what is right, what God has done, that we focus on those awesome things that he's done in our lives. And that's actually what keeps us going. That's the anchor. Like, you know, you look at the faith, the hope, the love, because we go through things, but we have faith we're going to get through. But if there's no hope, like you said at the end, that I'm actually going towards something, where am I going? You know, so there's got to be a hope that you're getting somewhere in life, and then weaving that love in, love for others, love for the Lord, you know, and how he actually, like that compassion that we have for people out of our circumstances is all born out of his love. So it's just so awesome. And I thank you for sharing those little stories as well. I'm sure that's going to really bless somebody today who's listening. And so, Angelique, is there anything in particular that you want to leave with our ladies today? Or we might have other people listening as well, might not only be ladies, but to inspire and to just encourage.
I would say we have to learn to trust the processes in our lives. You know, you have to make up your mind for once and for all. God has got this, and he's in it, or he's not at all. You can't have 1 foot in and 1 foot out. You can't be half pregnant. You either are or you aren't. You can't say, God, I trust you, but then not trust him tomorrow. So the way I've lived through these decades is I've watched for his clues. If I say that I trust the process, I watch for the clues. Now, that powerful scripture that talks about shut doors that no man can open and open doors that no man can shut. So that I use as the basis for my clues. So I am embarking on a very significant change in my life right now. So I say to the Lord, this is what you've given me to work with. This is what I can see in my limited vision. This is what I can see practically. I'm trusting the process. Show me the clues. Shut the doors that no man, not any man on earth, can open. Open those doors that no matter how hard they try, they can't be shut. And then I look at his clues along the way. What does that do for me? It takes away the stress. It takes away the anxiety. It takes away the second guessing. Do I do this or do I do that? Because God is truth. He's honorable. If he says he will lead the way, he will lead the way. So we just need to follow it. Sometimes you may not know where you're going, but you have to trust the process. That would be the first thing. The second thing in the whole faith, hope, love is you've got to take the risk to get out of the rut. Because having faith requires that you take risks. You see, if faith was easy, well, we wouldn't need it because you just do it. So faith actually is spelled R-I-S-K. It's risky. You've got to take the risk to get out of the rut. So what do you hear people do? They complain, they mutter, they moan. Nothing's going to change. Nothing is changing because they're not prepared to take the risk. Sometimes you've got to do it shaking in your boots. Sometimes you've got to do it while your stomach is in a knot. But it goes back to, am I trusting the process? So if I'm trusting the process, I'm prepared to take the risk. Why? Because I'm raising my faith meter higher. Then as I watch the clues start to unfold, my hope level arises. And then with hope, I'm inspired. And when I'm inspired, I start to act in love. Because then I'm in a much freer place to do so. You see, you can't give what you do not have. So you've got to get all of this on your internal engineering before you can start to get it out there. So definitely take the risk to get out of the rut. The other thing is really be sure that you don't ever slide into that victim mentality. It's easy to do. It's very easy to blame. It's very easy to say, well, if they didn't do this, I wouldn't be here. But that is another issue of faith, where we've got to say, I've just been through a recent situation where somebody I really, really trusted, not trusted as in somebody that was in my close circle, but trusted as a believer, completely did something that was way out of my framework. Now, you can have all sorts of emotion that goes with that. And you can, become the victim. Well, again, it goes back to, am I operating in faith? Am I operating in hope and operating in love? Why? Because God will deal with them in his own way. That's not my role. I just need to be sure that I'm walking in righteousness, in truth, and that I am living out what I speak and what I believe. So I think we've got to be very sure not to play the victim. God gave us his son, gave us his life, that we would live in victory. And I think that's a daily choice. We've got so much opportunity to get down in a hole and to be disappointed, but not to be without victory. It's a very, very important part of our lives. And then also to maximize every moment. We work with three things every day. We work with time, we work with opportunity, and we work with choice. Years and years ago, I think it's actually what launched my speaking career, was a statement that I made called "You win or you lose by the way that you choose." And that's a fact. Believer, non-believer, doesn't matter. We win or we lose by the way we choose. And again, our choices align with faith. And then that gives us hope. And so that circle never ends. So we need to choose wisely. We need to use our time wisely. For me, time is the best kept secret of the rich, because the rich know they can always make more money, but you cannot make more time. And the truth is, in time, your wealth is your health. How are you spending your time? How are you spending your time with God? How are you spending your time in your daily life? What are you watching? What are you listening to? All of those things are really important. And then the third thing is to be mindful of the opportunities that God gives us every single day. People pray for jobs, but then when the opportunity comes, they say, it's not quite the job that I want, so I'm not going to go for the interview. Well, then you can't say God hasn't answered prayer. It's just that you haven't taken the opportunity. So we can apply that to every single area. I mean, I picked fruit trees while I was waiting as a young girl for what on earth was going to happen with my life. I had to do something to see my way clear, because I knew that there was not enough money to put food on the table in the home. So you have to do what you have to do. And God honors that. So take the most of the opportunities that come our way. And sometimes they come dressed as obstacles. And sometimes they come dressed as hard work. But in all of these things, we are leaving a legacy. Now, a legacy for me is not one day when we die. My legacy is what I did yesterday that I'm living through today. So doing it right today means no regrets tomorrow. Our daily decisions determine our destiny. That's the walk of faith, isn't it? We make our Christian lives very complicated. It's actually very simple, very straightforward. It's just, what am I doing every day? Does it honor God? Does it honor my fellow man? Am I being true to him, to myself? Am I walking in righteousness? Am I keeping my faith? Am I living with hope? And am I shedding love around me wherever I go? For me, that's my faith walk. And I think that's why when you ask my bio, I just put it's simply me. Because for decades, we complicate this idea of who we should be for God, what we should be doing for God. And my best friend sent me a meme and it said, God, what would you have me to do today? And he just said, be with me. And be with me doesn't mean stop your entire life and, sit in one room and be with him. it means go out there and be.
Yes.
Go out there and
With
be.
wherever you go.
Exactly. And that's a lovely point, Tammy, is know who you are wherever you go. Because then you don't have to pretend to be anything for anyone. You just be who you are wherever you go, because you know whose you are, and you know what identity he's put in you.
So there's something that I like to just encourage my people with as well, is that God just put this awesome gift inside of us. And it's like something we need to unwrap. And sometimes it's our journey unwraps that gift. We never see where we're going, but as we go along, sort of the layers come off. And I always look at it as like our destiny scroll. It unfolds. You know, as we go, it unrolls, and then you're reading the story. And, you know, with trauma and that sort of thing is something I also just explained with the destiny scroll, is that when there's trauma, sometimes there's fragmentation, and then those parts of us that carry all the hurt and pain, they lock up pieces of our destiny scroll. So if we are carrying around the pain, the bitterness, the hurt, you know, all these things that we carry around, we're locking up our destiny. So it's in our best interest to get the healing and to release those parts, as you've said, you know, let go of all the stuff that's inside, so that we can actually unlock those pieces of our scroll that the enemy has locked up in all that pain and the sorrow, and to know that God has a good end for our lives, because he wrote about us before time began. And so, I mean, the minute you come into the earth, you become a prophetic voice in this earth that needs to be lived out. So, you know, as you're talking, I just want to maybe leave 2 scriptures. I thought of, I think it's in Proverbs 16, where it says, commit your way to the Lord and he will establish your path. Exactly what you were saying. You know, just give it to the Lord and let him unfold, you know, each day what needs to happen. And in some of those places, I think there's another version that says he will establish your thoughts. So it means he'll establish your thoughts in the direction that he wants you to go. You just need to be open to hear what he's saying in your life. And then also when you said, you know, faith is scary and it's risky, think of Joshua 1 verse 9 that says, you know, don't be afraid, don't be dismayed, for the Lord your God goes with you wherever you go. So it doesn't matter where you are, like you said earlier, whether you're up there or down there, he's going to be there with you in that process and just leading and guiding you. And yeah, so I don't know if you want to add something to that.
Well, you know, I just think you're putting a beautiful bow on this destiny scroll, because God is more committed to us than we actually realize. You know, it just takes not much reflection, even over the years, of sometimes very deep wilderness experiences, great mountaintop wonders that I've had with him. And yet I have one resounding testimony. And that is, it doesn't matter how bad was, and it doesn't matter how fantastic brilliant was. He is there all the way. And he is so committed to us becoming what he intended for us to be. And, you know, it's a process. It's a journey. It's a lifelong journey. But I loved what you said about we are a prophetic proclamation of heaven on earth is really what our lives should be. We should be just in a very soft and subtle way, be touching lives wherever we go. And you know, sometimes it can be something as simple as a smile that can crack a hard heart open. Sometimes it can be just a kind gesture, paying for somebody's groceries that you can see. Maybe, you know, it's very often that we see that in South Africa, where they're counting the money before they get to and what a beautiful opportunity to just say to the lady, you know, just pay for this, or just add this one's few items, some of them just standing with a few items in with my bill. We don't know that morning she just said, God, I need to feed my family. I've been there watching my mother try and do that. I know what that feels like. How do you know that in that moment in time you haven't become the very answer of God, not from God, of God, into that person's life? And so again, it goes back to maybe the call for us really is just to be more aware, more open, more generous, more hearing, more available to God. I think the one last thing I want to add to this, because I think God's got a lot to undo in us before he redoes in us. And we've got a lot to unlearn before we relearn the simplicity of our walk with the Lord, because we have had it horribly complicated from the pulpit, from social media, from so many programs that, exactly, that you've just got to say, Lord, just put me in your lane. Let me hear what I need to hear from you, for me, for the purpose that I'm here on earth. And I think that for me is super key, is that what here I am, what would you have me do today? And it's one of the things that I write about is waking up in the morning and saying, Lord, what is on your agenda as my life is concerned today, so that I can co-labor with you? And it just takes all the guesswork out of it. I know that this appointment is there. Well, I think it's part of your plan for me. And so just for us to yield a whole lot more and to not be so dictatorial to him about how we think it should be, but rather embracing what is, because then we're at our best and we're at our finest in terms of his purpose in our lives. Because you are where you are for a purpose, I am where I am for a purpose. Even when I get on an airplane and I think, well, I don't know who's going to be sitting next to me, but I'm here for a purpose today. And Lord, if there is something with this person, show me. I'm here, I'm available. And I think that just really puts the bow on it. Is I think a lot of people spend their lives waiting for this cataclysmic thing that God is going to do with their lives, and they're going to walk the stages of the world. God's saying, no, the harvest is around you everywhere you go. So that for me is a very good point to end, is just being available to him and love him all the way. And he loves you back far more than we can even contain.
Yeah, so it's just partner with him in your everyday life. Let him take you where he needs to go for that day. And that's the thing, is focus on that day. Don't look back. Don't look ahead, because often that creates anxiety. So partner with him in the day. And also just he created us to not be ordinary. So find that thing that's in your life that's not ordinary, something that makes you unique. Like I'm thinking of that sparkle that you mentioned, just so beautiful. And find that, because God doesn't want us to live these mundane lives. There's something so awesome that He's put inside of us. And so I also just want to say, thank you, Angelique, for your time. Thank you for sharing these beautiful nuggets. I can just see that God's done an amazing work in your life. I can just see the light on your face. I can see, I think I'd like to spend more time with you, just spend time talking to you. And it's like, when you just feel somebody's heart in something, and I just feel that's so beautiful. So just thank you for the time, and I'm sure that everybody's going to be blessed. And I think what I want to leave for the ladies that might be listening, or anybody that's going to listen, is find your tada. Like, I just absolutely love that. It's just find your tada and what it is that you can just celebrate and focus on that. So thank you so much today for your time, Angelique.
It's such a pleasure, Tammy. And just as a gift to your listeners, they are welcome to go onto my website, angeliquedutoit.co.za, and there's over 50 podcasts of free downloads. They can just download them, listen to them. There's some free ebooks there that they can access, and happy for any of them to drop me a line.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for adding that. And your website is Evangel, right? Is what it's called.
It's Angelique du Toit.co.za.
Okay, sorry. So what is the Evangel? Just that's from your name, right? Is that from your name?
It is from my name because the root meaning of my name is evangelist. And so I have registered an organization called Evangel, and it's going to have many interesting things happening underneath that umbrella. Okay. And so that's part of the project that I'm working on.
All right. So we look forward to that then.
Yes,
thank you so much. Thank you to our listeners. Thank you for those that have tuned in. I pray that you'll be blessed and encouraged and stay inspired.